Hello everyone, I'm Giuseppe from DualShockers.com, and this is the 8th episode of our weekly WeebCast. So, let's get started. Unfortunately, we will notice that Emily, my co-host from 1 to 7, is not here. And I have bad news. Unfortunately, Emily has been prevented for continuing to co-host the WeebCast by pressing family matters. So she won't be here from now on, which means that I will be our sole host for the moment, unless we find someone else to replace her, and finding some genuine weebs is kind of difficult nowadays. We'll have to see what happens. So, of course, her place is still available, and if her family matters are solved, we will welcome her back. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about that besides waiting for her and see if we can find her to fill the spot in the meanwhile. But for the moment, it will be me. Which means there will be more or less a monologue podcast for now on, and we'll see how it goes. I've considered just quitting on it because we don't have at the moment a replacement, but at the moment we did a good job so far and would like to keep it alive, even for the possibility that Emily comes back in the future. So we'll have to see. That being said, Emily is not quitting DualShockers. She luckily is going to stay, and she will continue to write news articles and reviews and whatnot as usual. It's just that she can't, unfortunately, devote as much time to the podcast as she used to be. So you will have to just deal with having me here for a while, and we'll see how it goes. If you think that the podcast was much better when Emily was here, I agree. And I absolutely think it's true. Unfortunately, there isn't much we can do about that, and we'll continue as it is. So today, our main topic is gacha games, which are very popular in Japan, and there are gacha games in the West, but mostly the big gacha games are from Japan. But before we go into that, we'll talk a little bit more about the games I played in this week and the anime I watched. So, first of all, I haven't played much of a Japanese game this week, unfortunately, because I'm still working on my review of Conan Exiles, which is quite the undertaking because it's a big game and it takes time to level up and all that. But I've delved a bit into my muv-luv addiction a little bit more, and I've been playing a bit of the muv-luv Alternative Chronicles games in Japanese, which I probably shouldn't talk too much about because they include a lot of spoilers about the original games. But they're very good, and I have having a lot of fun with that. I've also been playing some Grand Blue Fantasy, some Final Fantasy XIV, which got the new patch. So I'm delving into the story there, and it's great as usual. Final Fantasy XIV is probably the game which has the best story in the MMORPG series. It's one of the best Final Fantasy stories of all time, according to me. I know a lot of people would think that it's an exaggeration, but I don't believe so. It's a fantastic story, and the characters are really worthy of the Final Fantasy legacy, I believe. And if one day there would be some single player spin-off for the game, for the Final Fantasy XIV series, I would not be against it for sure. But for now, it's an MMORPG and it's fantastic. About anime, I've been watching the usual seasonal anime that have been going for a while, so there isn't many new ones as usual, like Legend of the Galactic Heroes is absolutely fantastic, or the whole plethora of romantic anime like Wotakoi and Tadakun are still really good. I've actually been watching, I binged one anime series that is actually kinda old. I believe it's from 2014, and that would be Madan no O to Vanadis, which is basically it also has an English title, Lord's Marksman and Vanadis. It's from a light novel by Tsukasa Kawaguchi, and it's actually pretty good. I mean, pretty good with reserve. The anime is basically kinda like kind of like the Heroic Legend of Arslan, but with less pretty boys and more pretty girls. And the art is a bit hit and miss, and it has some flaws, I would say. It's probably one of those anime that the whole like elitist YouTuber anime crowd would like destroy in their reviews, but I actually am enjoying it, especially its representation. It's a fantasy anime, and it's like it includes a lot of field battles and armies and stuff. That's kind of interesting, and it's quite unique in its own right, which is one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it. I've seen it all. It's like 12 episodes, I believe, or 13. Unfortunately, there is also a manga that covers this exactly the same. It's 13 episodes. There is a manga with 10 volumes that covers exactly the same part of the light novels. Unfortunately, it does not get to the end of the story, which is something I really don't like normally, because you're not able to actually see how the story goes on, and I don't have access at the moment to the light novels, but I've heard that the light novels are actually quite a lot better in many ways. But the anime is interesting, and if you like field battles and you like the Heroic Legend of Aslan, but you're okay with having less pretty boys and more pretty girls, it's worth watching, I believe. And that's pretty much it for manga anime. I actually bought the manga, binged the manga, and watched the anime pretty much during this week. So yeah, that was quite the binging. It was fun. And if you're into fantasy and you're into politics, fantasy politics, of course, that's an interesting thing to watch. I would advise it with reserve. It's not a super high quality game, so keep that in mind. So, and that's pretty much it. Let's move on to the main topic. The only positive thing of not having Emily here is that we're probably gonna go a little bit shorter with our podcast, and it's not going to be a full hour engagement anymore. But honestly, I miss her. I'm sure you guys will miss her as well. But you'll be able to find her writing on DualShockers. So in the end, you won't totally miss her, and hopefully she will be back soon. So our main topic today is gacha games and how to survive them. Because gacha games are interesting in some ways because they are a great time waster when you have other things to do, like you're working or you just are sitting on on the bus or on the train or whatnot. And they are actually interesting, especially when they are part of an IP, because they can give you a different outlook on that IP. They can actually reveal some parts of the story that are not revealed. Like, for instance, one of my favorite gacha games is muv-luv Alternative Strike Frontier, which not only is a game in which the development team of muv-luv adds some things that they wouldn't be able to cover in the main storyline because they're a little bit too crazy. So they do some crossover stuff and some fan service stuff. But they actually expand on the story in parts that have not been covered, if not in text. So, for instance, this week and last week, there was two events that were like a run of events from last year that shown Operation Lucifer in muv-luv, that muv-luv fans will recognize, and it is named a lot of times in the visual novels, but it's never represented. So you actually see the story of Operation Lucifer on your screen, and it's actually very interesting and very good. And it's a basic of the story. It's part of the prologue of the story of muv-luv Alternative, and it gives you an extended view on the plot. It's also interesting because it includes characters from the Kimiga no Zomoeien, which is another visual novel by Age. I know it's not pronounced Age. Other than that, many other gacha games have expansion, the storyline. Some of them are canon, some of them are not, but there are quite a few good gacha games on the market at the moment. Like, of course, one that's very popular is Fate Grand Order by Sonic Music Entertainment, and it's imported in the West by Aniplex. Other than that, there is Grand Blue Fantasy. It's probably the best mobile game I know. Like, the story is fantastic and it's really, really big. The art is incredible. The music is by Nobuo Uematsu, so I don't think I need to say much about that. And the game is fully in English, and even if it's not actually published in the West, but for some reason they do a full localization and it's available in Japan. And it's also fully voice acted, which is kinda rare, especially the story part. To have full voice acting is pretty big. And it's also gonna get a Persona 5 event really soon, so that's nice. Then there is Fire Emblem Heroes is another that I played for a while. I unfortunately kind of like wore me out, and so I stopped playing it. It's a decent game. I don't think it stands to par with others like Grand Blue Fantasy or Fate Grand Order. Others, not all gacha games are mobile. Like DMM does quite a few ports on PC. Grand Blue Fantasy is also available on PC and browser and stuff. And like, for instance, there is Dead or Alive Extreme Venus Vacation, which is only for PC, and it's a gacha game. It's basically a mobile game that runs on PC. So PC is normally the alternative for mobile games. And if you don't have the ability to play them on mobile, sometimes you can also emulate via BlueStacks, for instance. The Android emulator works really well for these games, and that normally also makes them run faster, since a lot of mobile gacha games have a lot of repetitive tasks, like leveling up your characters and stuff. When you do them emulated on PC, it's faster and it's a lot less clunky. So I normally, when I get a lot into a mobile game, I actually play it more on emulation than on Android, myself. I don't have an iPhone, so I actually am not an expert on how this game works on, iOS. But, gacha games have of course, they're normally seen as inferior to games, which is like a respectable position. I don't see it as something wrong. Because normally gacha games are very much built on their business model, which is a business model designed to goad you guys and me, because I played them. So they're not entirely fair, and they are certainly designed to nickel and dime you guys as much as possible, which is, they need to make money, so it's understandable in a certain point of view. And the gameplay is often very simple and often designed to ask you to put as few inputs as possible, because it's a distraction. Sometimes it's something that you do while you work. Sometimes it's something that you do while you're distracted or doing other things. So they're not complex gameplay wise, and which is understandable as well. I mean, sorry, I used the wrong word. So they are not complex. They're not like intensive, because some of them have very complex metagames, like Grand Blue Fantasy has a very complex metagame. Like muv-luv Alternative Strike Frontier, the actual battles, you can, if you're good at it, you can let them go by themselves without doing anything. You can even accelerate them. But you will have to actually be very tactical in combining pilots and mechas and the skill in a way that it will be effective against a certain enemy and certain mission. So it's not easy, and it can become defined complex, and the gameplay meta is actually pretty interesting if you look at it. And this goes for many gacha games. So it's not like their gameplay is entirely simple, entirely brainless. Sometimes they actually have a very interesting way to strategize in order to actually complete the missions that you have to do with the least effort possible so that you can actually do them on the side, which is kind of the interesting part of gacha games, that it's not an intensive activity that you have to do, that you have to basically focus on. And gacha games also have this thing, as I say, that they expand a lot on the stories of existing franchise, and there is certainly a lot of attractive in the collection part. It's not a mystery that gacha games are very heavy on fan service, and they aim a lot on pushing the collection part, especially on waifus. So the idea of collecting your favorite waifus is something that is very big, attractive of these games, and some will like it, some will not. So if you don't like gacha games and you don't think you will ever like them, I'm not here to persuade you. Probably this podcast is not, like this episode of the podcast is not for you, because in the end, there is nothing wrong in disliking them. I actually know more people that dislike them than people that like them. But in the end, if you enjoy them, if you're open to them, I think there is something to appreciate. Personally, I hated mobile games until a couple of years ago, more or less when I discovered Grand Blue Fantasy, which is when I broke into the idea that mobile games can be very good. And now I play them all the time, because with my job, I sometimes don't have time, and many gacha games I can play while I'm writing for DualShockers. And that help my levels of stress quite nicely. Thing is that gacha games need to be approached in a certain way, which is why the title of this podcast is Gacha Gaming: How to Survive Them. Because if you get addicted, you could really destroy your finances, and you could really live a very unsatisfying gaming life with them. Meaning that you need to set yourself, this is what works for me, so it may not work for you. It's important to set yourself some goals and some precise limits, because gacha games, most of them you can play them without spending a single dime, which means that you will just access their basic features. Like, for instance, Dead or Alive Extreme Venus Vacations, I don't spend anything in it, because I don't think their business model is, business model is pretty standard, but the percentages are ridiculous. So I'm not going to spend $40 for a special gacha that has less than 1% chance to give me the thing I want. That there is no way. It's simply unfair. In which case I just play it free, and I just decide I'm fine with playing this game for free, and I will not worry about what is given only for money. So, like, for instance, Tamaki, the new character, for now she's only been in paid gachas. So I just made peace with the idea that I won't ever until they put her into the normal gachas, if they ever will. And when you make peace with that idea that you can't have everything, it makes everything easier. So what you get is actually a joy, because you get the new shiny waifu that is not like the exclusive one for paid users, but you still can get a lot of things for yourself. And even if the percentages are frustrating, it's just a matter of rejoicing for what you have instead of griping for what you don't. So you need to set your expectations realistically. Like, if you have a 1% chance of getting a super rare result, then you have to know that it's gonna take 100 attempts to get one. So just play it without expectations of getting too many super rares. And this goes for pretty much all gachas. Even if, like, different games have different percentages. So some of them are more generous, some of them are less generous. Like, for instance, like the Dead or Alive is probably the least generous gacha game I know. So if you want to play it, and if you are a Dead or Alive fan, then it's an interesting game. If you like fan service too, of course, it's a super interesting game, because it's probably one of the best graphics, being on PC. They just implemented 4K resolution. The thing is that, though, you need to go into it with the idea that it's very unfair towards people that do not play. It's not a generous game at all. They will give you some things to keep you playing, but they will not, like, treat you in a preferential way. You're an unpaid user, so that's it. I would actually advise against being a paid user in that game, because it's so unfair that even if you pay, the percentages to actually getting something for your money are really low. Like, for a paid gacha that has like a 1% chance to get something good is really not good. So this is a game that if you like it, I advise to play for free. There are other games that are like super generous, like muv-luv Alternative Strike Frontier, that you've seen a lot of news on the site, because I really like it, and I really love muv-luv, so that's all there is to it. Because most of the times you choose a game not because you like the game, but because you like the franchise it's bound to. But it's super generous. Like, every week it will give players at least 1 or 2 super rares just by playing the game, without any gacha involved. And that's fantastic. On top of that, they will give you some tickets to play with the gacha. So super rare tickets that will automatically give a super rare result. So sometimes you come out of 1 week with minimum 4 super rare. Like, that's actually an interesting thing, because I haven't seen any other games do it like that. And it's strange that it's DMM, because DMM is known as one of the most draconic companies. It's the same company that does like Dead or Alive. So it's actually strange that Dead or Alive and muv-luv are on opposite ends of the spectrum in generosity towards free gamers. And then there is the middle ground, which is, for instance, Granblue Fantasy or Fire Emblem Heroes, for instance, and many others, like the one by Yoko Taro, for which I forgot the name at the moment, but the various like Tales ones, and those are like acceptable percentages, but nothing like extremely generous like muv-luv. Actually, Granblue Fantasy is more towards the generous scale, especially when they have like anniversary events and they give you a lot of stuff. Especially because it's been a few years in the market, so it will it's very successful, and they don't need to like gauge users to have that much of a earnings. Like, one thing that's important though, when you there is actually nothing wrong with paying in these games. I've seen people applying a stigma to giving some money to get some advantages in this game, and for one reason I can understand what it is, but let's think about it. They're free-to-play games, so the money you give and the money you pay for a gacha or two is supporting developers. So if you enjoyed the game, there is nothing wrong actually paying something for it. Then you're actually it's quite morally, let's say, positive, because of course people are putting work into this, so it's good that they get something out of it. So I would absolutely be favorable, and I do, to paying for, like, for instance, I put some money on once in a while in Granblue Fantasy because it's a good game that I enjoy a lot. So I like to support its development. I put some money on muv-luv because even if it's already super generous, I appreciate what the developers do, so I like to support them. Of course, I don't want to spend too much money, and this is one of the important parts of surviving gacha games, which is to give yourself limits. Just think about every month how much you can afford paying for gacha games. Personally, my limit for gacha games every month is about $40, which is $50, which is the price of a game, like a price of a PC console game. Instead of getting a PC console game, I spend that money on gacha games. I actually don't buy any loot boxes on PC and console games because I already pay for those games. So I don't really marry the idea or like the idea of spending more on those games. But on the other hand, gacha games, I don't pay for them. So, I give myself a $40 bucks normally. Sometimes I go to 50, but that's like very rare. A $40 limit on a gacha game, or on the gacha games I'm playing, and I distribute that limit between them. Of course, depending on how much money you make and how much money you feel comfortable paying for those games, then that limit may vary. But of course, it depends on you. I think I'm talking to other people that they can make decision for their own finances. So you certainly don't need me to teach you or to patronize you on this. You just need to make your own decision and decide what's best for you. One thing that's important is not to get drawn into the gacha loop, which is that there is a character you really like, and it's in the gacha, and you try the gacha and you don't get it. And you say, oh, let's try it again. And you try again, and you don't get it. And statistically, you keep not getting it unless they have this step-up mechanic that after a few times you try it, you get it, you unlock the character for sure. But those are normally very costly. Like in muv-luv, for instance, you need to spend like $200 or $300 to actually get the sure safe drop. Or Granblue Fantasy, to spark a character, it takes a ton of money. So I would go advise against it. That's personally me. But don't get into the loop of one more time, because one more time adds up, and it adds up really quickly. So, and you end up like spending $200 or $300, and maybe you don't even get your character at the end. Because, for instance, in Dead or Alive, there is like a 1.1% chance of getting a character in the most generous gacha they have. And 1% chance, it's like 100 attempts for like $30 each. Yeah, not a good thing. Especially if you start like getting really frustrated and into it. So yeah, do it once maybe, up to your limit. And then if you reach your limit, well, that's it. Next month, maybe more luck. Most gacha games, in any case, they will have reruns of events. So if you don't get something now, you may have other possibility later. And maybe the gacha, paid gacha only characters also get switched into unpaid gacha after a while. So there is other possibilities. Just don't get frustrated. Just get into it like saying, okay, I'm giving it a try. It's a lottery. It may work. It might not. If it doesn't work, move on. If it works, great. Be happy about it. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And you should not give in to the temptation, which is what the developers want, but you don't want to give in to the temptation to actually just keep paying until you get what you want, because it unless you're rich, and which is good for you, you simply end up like spending way too much money into it. But other than that, there is nothing wrong with actually paying something to gacha game developers, because they work, so they deserve to be paid for it. And there is absolutely no moral stigma against it. If it works for you, it works for everyone. If it doesn't work for you to pay, it's great that you're a free user, and you can enjoy what the game gives you for free. So, but this is probably the most important, let's say, rule to survive gacha games. Other than that, it's simply a matter of mostly staying up to date with the events, because the events are normally the best in most games, the best source of free content. So in most games, events will provide you with free characters or free whatever unlocks a character. Some games have weapons that unlock characters, like Granblue Fantasy, or other games like Terra Battle as this. I believe Terra Battle 2 still has weapons or something that unlock characters. I still haven't played it, but I'm always been looking into it, and I'm probably gonna play it sooner or later, because I love Hironobu Sakaguchi, and his stories are good. So I will probably give it a try sooner or later. Terra Battle 1, you just throw characters. But yeah, in the end, it's just a matter that if you do events, you get the advantage for it, which is either gems or whatever currency they have to draw characters with the gacha for free, or characters directly, like Granblue Fantasy. They give a lot of like SSR characters, especially in the like when it's a normal event, they give you an SR character, or when it's when it's a crossover event, like the Persona 5 that's gonna come out, or the Conan Detective Conan one that just was online a few weeks ago. Those actually give SSR that you can use. They're good characters that you can use without problems. So the thing is actually do the events as much as you can, because those make you save a lot of money in either currency that you can use with the gacha or with giving you characters by themselves. And it's also fun. Like one of the most fun part of gacha games is the event, at least for me, because they give you new content that you can enjoy and regularly, instead of just doing the main story, and you're finished with it. So this is pretty much the most important parts. Gacha games are interesting in the way that they they kind of test your limits as a gamer. I don't think playing gacha games makes you less of a gamer than playing normal games. It's just a matter of whether you like them. Games are games. Sure, gacha games are probably less involving, but they are still games. So in the end, if you like them, personally, I think it's a great thing to play them on the side as an addition to your gaming hobby and habits. In the end, that's just me though. Again, what I'm saying in this episode works for me. It may not work for everyone. It may not work for you. But yeah, I'd say pretty much this is it about gacha game. If you're thinking of a recommendation, I would definitely recommend like an entry level gacha game that I think is great to start with is Granblue Fantasy. If you like fantasy RPGs, just because the production values are so high and there is so much content for everyone to enjoy, and it's in English. So that's a bonus. The process to subscribe is a little convoluted because being not released in the US, it's not, you have to go through a Japanese registration, but there is a guide on the site that you can check out and follow. Just search for Granblue Fantasy and you will find it. Also, there is an interesting thing that Cygames, the company that is working on Granblue Fantasy, had a presence at GDC and the latest PAX, I think it was PAX East, and then they are going to be at Anime Expo this summer to introduce the Granblue Fantasy franchise. This could be in view of the console game, Granblue Fantasy Project Relink, but I still have some hope that they will release it in the West sooner or later. Personally, I'm just gonna continue on Japan because it's in English anyway, and I have so much stuff in that account that starting from scratch, I couldn't even think about it. But another good one, if you want to get an entry-level gacha game, is probably Fire Emblem Heroes. If you like Fire Emblem, the art is very good and they have interesting stories. The voice acting is not too great, but that's Nintendo stuff, and that I'm not exactly a fan of their localization style. But if you like Fire Emblem, you probably like it. And other than that, if you want to get into playing a Japanese game in Japanese and you like the muv-luv series, the muv-luv Alternative Strike Frontier is fantastic because it's super generous in what it gives. And it's definitely a game that every week will keep you giving you good new stuff that you can actually use. Like, it's not like a lot of games give you free stuff, but it's crappy characters, crappy accessories or whatever, or equipment or whatnot, and it will not really be something that you ever use again. On the other hand, the Strike Frontier gives you good characters that will also be bonus characters that will basically grant you bonuses when you use it the week after, most of the times, in the event the week after, and the events come every week. So it's actually characters and mechas that you use, and it's satisfying like that. Of course, in English there is also, of course, how can I forget that? Mostly because I don't play it, but I don't play it because I'm not an enormous fan of the Fate franchise, but I heard the game is very good. The Fate Grand Order game is definitely a popular and high quality game for people to play, so that's another one that you can use. If you want to play on PC, you have Dead or Alive. Again, that one is super good graphically. It's not exactly a deep game, unfortunately. But if you like eye candy, it's great. But again, it's really, really stingy with the stuff it gives you. So be aware of that if you go into it. So that's it for gacha games. So if you have any questions about the gacha games I mentioned, feel free to put them in the comments and I will try to respond to them. And I'm still planning to write a guide for muv-luv Alternative Strike Frontier, because I think it's a good gacha game for people that want to play it. And muv-luv fans should not miss it because it offers a lot of insight on many characters. So I will definitely try to help people playing it even if they don't know Japanese. So let's move into this week's news, which there is quite a bit. Let's start from the earlier. So Valkyria Chronicles 4 got a premium edition for the West, which has some really interesting stuff for the price. It's actually for once, like, this is kind of a miracle. For once, the Western premium edition is actually better than the Japanese one. Because the Japanese one had no figures in it. It had only like a CD and an art book inside. So it was it wasn't bad. We have an unboxing video on the side, so it wasn't a terrible edition, but it wasn't for a 10th anniversary. Well, it wasn't great. But other than that, in the English one, we have a vinyl figure of the tank, of the hero tank, of the Affen, and it looks fantastic. Like, I'm definitely considering buying this one because it honestly looks really good. I actually don't know how big it is, but it's really, really good looking. I'm definitely gonna consider buying it, and I will end up with 2 collection edition of the game. So yeah, I'm a big Valkyria fan, so there isn't much I can do about it. I'm a victim. Just help me, AAA. Other than that, let's move on. And we still don't have a firm release date though. Well, it's still fall 2014 for all platforms. 2014? Wow. I must be really tired. 2018. I wish it was still for 2014. I would be 4 years younger. Anyway, this was super good news. Sega announced Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 for PS4. This is going to be just remasters, so there is not going to be many changes gameplay-wise. It's not going to be big remakes like Kiwami and Kiwami 2, which is normal because Kiwami and Kiwami 2 were like remakes of Yakuza and Yakuza 2 were PS2 games, so they really needed a new coat of paint. But Yakuza 3, 4, and 5, they already looked great on PS3. So just bumping up the resolution and the frame rate is actually pretty good. That will run at 1080p and 60 frames per second on PS4. We don't know if there is going to be any further bonus on PS4 Pro. I don't know if it's possible to bump up the assets to 4K, to be honest, from a PS3 game like that. We'll see. In any case, they will come out, like Yakuza 3 comes out in Japan on August 9. Yakuza 4 in the fall and Yakuza 5 in the spring. So there is a big string of Yakuza games for people that did not play them on PS3 and they just want to experience them again. We have to hope that it will come west, but I would be surprised if Sega did not bring them west because the localization is already done. and especially considering that there is no change gameplay story-wise, they're not gonna add stuff. The localization is like 1-to-1. They don't have to localize new content. So it will be great. I'm pretty sure that Sega will announce them sometime soon. Hopefully. Then, going back to muv-luv, because there is never enough of muv-luv, the PS Vita version of muv-luv and muv-luv Alternative, which is the first 3-ish games, because if you are not familiar with the series, muv-luv, the original muv-luv is muv-luv Extra plus muv-luv Unlimited, so it's kind of 2 separate games, while muv-luv Alternative is the sequel of muv-luv Unlimited. So it's kind of 3-ish games for the price of 2, are going to be released in North America on June 12th and in Europe on June 8th. And this is for PS Vita. So it's definitely a great thing they're coming into a portable platform. The graphics, like the visuals, like are very good for a PS Vita screen. So I'm definitely gonna replay them on PS Vita, and I advise you do as well. But it's a game that it's honestly a series that anyone that has any interest in visual novels and in science fiction should play. So if you haven't got any on PC and you still have a PS Vita, I would definitely advise for it. And if you want to read a review, you can read it on the site. I have a review of both games. And, honestly, the only thing is that playing it portable, you're gonna cry a lot. I'm not sure if you're crying in public, especially muv-luv Alternative. I don't know. You decide. Otherwise, maybe you want to go with the PC version or just playing the PS Vita version at home. I'm personally hoping that they will consider a Switch version because, like, it will bring back some buzz for the series, and it's always good to have more platforms. As a very big fan of the series, I really hope for a Switch version as well. Then, Ni no Kuni 2 shipped over 900,000 copies worldwide, and the series passed 2.8 million copies. This is not a super big number. It's not even a million, but we have to consider it's in 2 months, so it's not terrible as well. I guess the long wait and the delays kinda turned off a few people. But 900,000 copies is not bad. So it's definitely a new milestone for the series, and hopefully word of mouth, it's a great JRPG, so hopefully word of mouth will make it have a long tail, and it will continue selling, at least passing 1 million. But yeah, let's move on. Suda51, announced yesterday at MomoCon that Killer 7 is going to Steam this fall. Only for Steam, so no console. The game was originally released, I believe, in 2005 for PS2 and GameCube. The game is gonna be published in the West by NIS America as usual for the latest Suda51 games. It's a very peculiar but very interesting game, so I would advise giving it a try when it comes out. So it's coming out in the fall. We still don't have a release date, but it's coming, so that's good. Then Bandai Namco is considering bringing the Sword Art Online franchise to the Switch, which is good because it's definitely JRPGs are good on Switch, and they're not like very demanding visual wise. So even if the Switch is a little underpowered, it's not an issue. And they say that they are still considering, so they're still talking about it with their IRAPs and stuff. So they're positively considering it. So look forward to it. Basically, the idea is this. This was also a question that I responded during an event this morning, which is going to be yesterday morning for you when you listen to this podcast. So this kind of question and answers that are like, they pick the questions they answer, which means that if they didn't want to kind of tease, they wouldn't have picked that question, pretty much. So I expect an announcement in this year, or at least the next Sword Art Online game to come to the Switch, like, by default. I remember asking Yosuke Futami, the producer of the franchise, in Tokyo in September last year, about the Switch version. They simply told me that they did not bring Fatal Bullet to the Switch because it was too late. because they were already been working on the game for a while when the Switch was even announced. So they simply didn't make it in time, but they still could bring some ports of older games since they've been doing it with PC as well, and they could just bring by default the newer games, which is good. Switch could definitely use some more JRPGs. And then, last but not least, this is kind of Japanese and kind of not. Because you probably know that there is this big hubbub about female protagonists and whatnot in Battlefield 5 by DICE. And a lot of people say that females in World War II are not realistic, which is false, because the women definitely fought in World War II, in some countries more, in some countries less. But there were definitely many instances in which women fought in World War II, but that's not the issue. That's not the main issue, at least. Yoko Taro actually nailed Yoko Taro, the director of Nier Automata and the creator of the Nier franchise and the Drakengard franchises, pretty much hit the nail on the head about it, adding, providing some weeb wisdom to the whole ordeal. So this was his comment, which would be near and dear to many fans of Japanese games and media. So his comment to an article talking about it was, meanwhile, in Japan, battleships are made into beautiful girls, warlords are made into pretty boys loving boys, schoolgirls ride tanks, and anything you want. So this is the whole thing, which is very important in Japanese, in the Japanese philosophy of making games, which is you don't need to be accurate when it's creative and it's fun. Even if woman in World War II was not accurate, and it is accurate, but even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. Because, look at Japanese games. Okay, you have a Kantai collection in which Stark Witches, in which girls are hybridized with battleships or World War II planes. I'm not into it, but a lot of people like it. Or you have the old Sengoku Bazara and the whole Samurai Warriors franchises that there probably couldn't be more liberties taken on the whole Sengoku era in Japan. Or even worse, the whole warlord Otaku and Fujoshi, passion. Those are a lot of liberties, or even on the other side, the vein of anime and media in which Japanese warlords are the daimyos from the Sengoku era are turned into pretty girls on the other side, which also is the base for instance, for one of the Sengoku Ran's stories, for instance, or Girls and Panzer and stuff like that. But there are many historical things that are in which Japanese developers take a lot of liberties. Another examples are the historical spin-offs of the Yakuza series, in which, for instance, I believe it was Yakuza Ishin, in which was it Ishin or Kenzan? I think it was Ishin. Yeah, it was Ishin. In which basically, if it isn't, just forgive me, and it's late. In which they actually put in the game an historical figure as the protagonist, Ryoma Sakamoto, which is a hero of that period, a national hero in Japan, and they gave him the likeness of Kazuma Kiryu and made him do stuff that he definitely did not do during his life. It totally looked completely different, took a ton of liberties, but it was it was a fun game, and that's what matters. That it is fun and creative, and there is fan service, or it's done for the fans and for the authors. In the end, what matters is the creativity, the creative freedom of developers. If they want to do something and they want to portray something, there is no reason why they shouldn't. Even if it's not accurate, even if it does not fit what you personally think or you personally think is good. In the end, I've actually seen people I know that criticize DICE's decision on putting front and center women in World War II But on the other hand, when a Japanese game gets censored or criticized, they're very ready to defend the creative freedom of the developers. But remember, creative freedom is an absolute value. So if you defend creative freedom, you should defend it always. So you should defend the creative freedom of the Japanese developers that work on making Date Masamune into a pretty girl, or you should defend having ladies front and center in World War II, because it's creative freedom. Battlefield has never been a realistic series, and this looks even less realistic than ever, but for other reasons that have nothing to do with women. It's just, if you've seen the trailer, it's crazy. It's totally like it. World War II was never like that. So in the end, it's creative freedom, and it's made in the name of fun and what developers want to do. So you should definitely support developers that go out of the beaten path for creativity. Whatever their motivation is, we should still support creative freedom. And that's something that Japanese developers have been waving the flag off for a long time. Like, there is few things as wacky and quirky and sometimes crazy in Japanese games. And even if they're not accurate, people love them because they're crazy, quirky, and funny. And they have stuff that's totally out of whack, like Kazuma Kiryu as a samurai or stuff like that. So in the end, creative freedom is something we should support, whatever reason they have, and whatever crazy it is. In this case, it's not even crazy, but even if it was, it's what it is. It's what the developers want to portray, and they should be able to, without being criticized for that. So in the end, that's it for today. That's it for the news. And again, I'm sorry for the lack of Emily. I know that this podcast would have been a lot funnier and a lot more interesting if she was here, providing her insight and her wit and her funny attitude. Unfortunately, she won't be here for a while, and I hope I managed to at least entertain you for a little while myself. If I didn't, feel free to thumb down. If you did enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and add a like, because you know it helps. And also feel free to leave comments on what can be improved, because again, especially with this big change, there is going to be things that can be improved and should be improved. So please feel free to give advice on that. Other than that, I was Giuseppe Nelva from DualShockers. And that's it for our episode 8. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good time. Bye.